So what would you say the diet and lifestyle habits are of those that seem to be perpetually lean?
You know what stands out the most, man, is like, and I surveyed a lot of people on this. I did a video about it. Probably the number one thing of people that are perpetually lean is they're almost these like fidgeter type, mildly anxious people. Like, you ever meet those people that are just always moving? Like, not just because they're forcing themselves to move, but they're always kind of doing something, right? And I think there's almost a phenotype there. There's almost maybe something we haven't really cut through on and found what it is. But these are kind of, you look at these people and like people that are always lean, whether they are fitness oriented lean or just lean, right? We all encounter those people that they're just lean. They're not skinny. They have some muscle, but they're not also obsessed with working out. And they're always doing something and they almost can't sit still. And when you look at the literature and you find like how powerful non-exercise activity thermogenesis is and how powerful actually literal fidgeting is, even for just a thermic effect, it would make sense. And it's like, I mean, how many people do you know? I mean, how many overweight people do you know that have been like overweight their whole life that are necessarily like super fidgety people? But when you think of a fidgety person, it's like you kind of think of this like wiry, kind of thin, kind of
sinewy.
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
Is this what is referred to sometimes as NEAT, the acronym NEAT?
Yeah, non-exercise activity thermogenesis.
And what do you think the mechanism is there? Do you think it's purely that NEAT just burns a lot of calories, like fidgeting burns calories?
I think there's a lot of calorie burning that's happening underneath the surface, right? That we don't really think about all the time. There's also a thermic effect, simply by moving all the time. There's also a neurological effect, and there's also a muscle stimulation effect, right? So like even fidgeting, right? Like think about it. Yeah, you're physically moving. You're also actually contracting muscle, which we know from a lot of like the glucose literature that contracting a muscle can help translocate GLUT4 and bring that glucose in. So simply by moving more, like so if I'm just doing this, I can't remember the studies right offhand. I don't like keep them all collated in my head, but I did some videos on this, like talking about like what is like a main thing that really drives a lot of non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And I can't remember the exact figure, but I mean, fidgeting was a monumental amount. It wasn't anything to sneeze at. Like putting people in metabolic wards for short periods of time and actually monitoring their fidgeting. And it was nothing to sneeze at. We're talking dozens of calories more in an hour just by people that were like doing things like this.
Wow. So what's the, if you had to reverse engineer it, like what would be the actionable then takeaway? I mean, I feel like fidgeting is a largely subconscious behavior, right?
You know what I've kind of coached people on myself is for guys. I joke, I'm like, be the guy your husband or be the guy your wife wants you to be. And I joke about that because it's like, okay, with my wife, she's like, hey, can you help the dishes? So it's kind of a joke, right? But you have to almost play it up and gamify it in a way. So I really do consciously think about those things. I'm like, oh, there's dishes in the sink. I'm going to do them, right? Okay, I consciously think about there's a parking spot close to the door or there's a parking spot back there. It takes me, 1 more minute to walk that and maybe I burn an extra 30 calories. And it's not that I'm sitting there obsessing about the calories, but it's eventually you do form a habit with it. Or it's like, hey, you see your kid's toy on the ground. Like, yeah, your kids should pick up their toys. But also if you want to walk 20 feet over there, pick up the toy, just do it. Like, don't be mentally lazy. Stop framing it about being physically lazy and make it more about mentally lazy. Because a lot of times you do have the energy to actually go pick up that towel that's on the ground. You're intellectually being lazy because you don't want to break your pattern of thought to go pick it up. It's not that you physically can't go pick it up. So it's like breaking this intellectual laziness. Next thing you know, I mean, this could literally amount to like 200, 300 calories per day doing all these little things. That's crazy. That's a lot.
Wow. And that could be the difference, right? Like between a energy balance and a calorie deficit.
For sure. Well, think about 200 calories a day adds up to over the course of a week, right? I mean, you're looking at, 1,400 calories. That's almost a half a pound.
Wow. Half a pound of fat.
Just by picking up some stuff off the ground.
Damn. That's super empowering. Yeah. Parking further from the entrance of the supermarket. I mean, that's super effective. That can be super effective. And then just household chores. I mean, these are non-exercise activities, doing the dishes, chasing your kids around the house, playing with your cat. That's super empowering. Okay, so we've got fidgeting and related non-exercise physical activities. What comes next?
Yeah, I wrote them down because
love it.
This video crushed. And clearly it was the video that I did about it. It was like, hey, I surveyed a bunch of people that were not fitness people that would just casually, I call them casual worker outers, people that just, they casually work out, but they're also people that are fit, and not fit by maybe bodybuilding standards or anything, but just fit by like they're in shape, right? And one of the other ones is the kind of people that forget to eat a lot. And I'm not saying like deliberate intermittent fasting or anything like that. That is a very conscious thing. But these are the kind of people, like a lot of times women, you find that like, oh my gosh, like they get so busy in their day, like stay-at-home moms and things like that. They're like, oh my gosh, like I got so much going on, I forgot to eat. But one time is one thing. 2 times is another thing. But when you start seeing that this is like just the way that they operate, so much to the point that they have this fractal eating pattern that's just all over the place, and it's not regimented with intermittent fasting where I break my fast at 12 p.m. or something like that. It's like, hey, no, sometimes I eat breakfast, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I eat lunch, sometimes I don't. And it's all over the place. Sometimes my lunch isn't until 2 p.m. There's just like total randomness to their eating. And it's not a big thing if they forget to eat. And by very nature, they probably have these like random periods of deficits and possibly even random periods of surpluses. Because I've also noticed with skinny people all the time is that a lot of times when you put food in front of them, like sometimes they'll eat very little, but also times they'll eat a huge amount. And you're like, how did you do that? And they're like, I don't know, I just have a fast metabolism. Well, no, maybe it's also because you haven't eaten in the last like 19 hours and you didn't even realize it.
Yeah. So, I mean, not eating when you're not hungry. Like if you're hungry, eat. But I think a lot of people kind of eat because it's just regimented into their daily routine.
Yeah, it's dopaminergic. I mean, it's just a hit, right?
Yeah. That's that is solid advice. When it comes to breakfast in particular, or even like the meal that you would otherwise eat before your workout, are you into fasted workouts?
I still love my fasted workouts, but I've made a really conscious effort to deliberately not do fasted workouts some days, just because the evidence is there that like you want to kind of maintain what's called glucose tolerance, where if you don't use it, you lose it to a certain degree. So in the same sense that if you don't occasionally train fasted, it's going to be really hard for you to train fasted. Like people that have never trained fasted, the first time they train fasted, they're like, where's all my energy? Well, you don't have the mitochondrial machinery to sort of help you with that. That makes perfect sense. It actually goes the other way too, right? So I used to fasted train so much to the point where I would actually bash having food before, at least for myself, because I'm like, if I have food before, like I feel sluggish, I feel doggish. And then you're like, well, actually it started with the rodent model literature. Then it kind of, there's been a few human models on it. It's like, you actually, like even in the short term, you're going to not have that well of glucose tolerance, good of glucose tolerance. So you're basically making it so these carbs that are coming in are not efficiently getting in the way that they ordinarily would. So now I make a deliberate effort where like 2 days a week, I do have carbohydrates prior to a workout, just because I'm like, even though it's not necessarily quote unquote optimal for me, it's kind of helping it so that I can switch back and forth or substrate switch a little bit better.
Yeah. I used to exclusively train fasted. And then I took up boxing over the pandemic, and I really saw the value of pre-workout carbs. Because boxing is a really specific kind of workout. It's like high intensity interval training, but it's just like it's so demanding. It's so like glycolytic.
Yeah.
And I started when I started boxing, I was like doing that fasted just because that's how I like to, weight train. And I just saw that my energy would just like tank without some carbs in the system. Yeah,
man. And and the thing is unfortunately, and I used to be one of these people. So like, I'm just going to be real, I'll fall on the sword here. It's like, it's just because you don't need carbs. It's just because they're, you're enabled, you basically have had carbs. There's an element of that is true predominantly in endurance work. Like, yes, you can go long periods of time with endurance work without carbohydrates. 3.7 grams or so every 20 minutes to be exact. And that's just to prevent exercise-induced hypoglycemia. Above and beyond that, you're beta oxidative, so it doesn't really matter. But when you are someone that is actually exercising at a high intensity, like you do notice it with some carbs on board, for sure. You definitely notice an improvement in your ability to maintain. And it's pure like substrate utilization. You are chaining in that mode. And if your glycogen stores are topped off, then that's gonna help you out. And if you do have a consistent stream coming in at a certain rate, there is something psychological happening as well. We've seen this with like the maltodextrin studies where they would take flavorless maltodextrin and have people swish it around in their mouth. Purely like swishing some carbohydrates in the mouth would give a boost. So there's something that's psychological happening when carbohydrates hit our mouth that might actually help us. So this is coming from a low carb guy too. So I'm just being very real here that like, yes, I prefer to train in a low carb fasted state. I feel better. But when I'm really doing something demanding or I want to be explosive, you're going to bet that carbs come on board. They definitely do. They give me that extra little 10% that I need for that explosiveness.
And what are your favorite sources of carbs these days?
I might get kind of flamed for saying this, but like have no affiliation with them, but the Momentous Fuel, have you used that one?
No.
It's like a form of, it's almost like cyclic dextrin. It's a form of carbohydrate that rapidly absorbs, but isn't high glucose spiking. So you're not getting this major spike, but you're getting rapid absorption. Cool. So pretty stable. So that's one of the cool, like kind of liquid carbohydrates. So it's funny because like I won't eat like starch or something like that before my workout. If I'm going to have carbs because I train first thing in the morning, it's usually some form of benign liquid carb, right? Like I'm not going to go have a high fructose corn syrup or something like that, but I'm usually going to have something that I can be in a little bit of control with. Usually something that's along the lines of more pure glucose. Like fructose doesn't really have a place for me unless I was doing a little combination. Again, if you go down the weird rabbit hole of like why Gatorade was created, right? The combination of sodium transporters and sodium glucose transporters, S-GLUT1, where you're using a little bit of glucose, a little bit of fructose, and a little bit of salt. You are going to get maximum hydration that way, but at what cost, right? Like you're taking in garbage. So for me, it's something pretty simple. I'm not even afraid to have like a little bit of flavorless dextrose or something like that. Something that sounds so terrible when you're talking about from like a blood glucose standpoint, right? Why would I ever want to drink a glass or like 20 grams of pure dextrose? Well, because maybe I want something that's going to like just absorb fast, get into my bloodstream and not have any kind of digestive load whatsoever. So I get pretty utilitarian about the kind of carbs that I use, but whatever.
I dig it. I think you've got to find what works for you. I think there's this perception that you win some kind of moral brownie points for eating lower carb. That that any additional carbs you intake beyond what your body, I don't know, needs to sustain itself is like you're losing karma points for it. But it's like if eating more carbs works for you to make you feel better about your workout and gives you more energy, then by all means do it. I mean, it's not that carbs are inherently fattening or obesogenic or promote glucose intolerance or anything like that. It's about the dietary pattern as a whole. It's about your lifestyle, your energy intake. So I like this this newly adopted Thomas DeLauer flexible mindset.
Well, it's especially if you're fit, right? Like especially if you're fit. If you're not insulin resistant and you're already active and already fit, I think it's a pretty negligible difference either way, right? Whether you want to train with carbs on board or without. So at that point, you got to find like what's really hitting hard for you, what's working the best. Because if you're already fit, you're going to be incinerating those carbohydrates so fast. Your mitochondria is functioning well. You're not in this point where you're, insulin resistant and not able to utilize those carbs properly. Which, dude, have you seen people doing this like sugar diet, sugar fasting? Have you seen Mark Bell recently?
No.
Oh my God, dude.
Tell me.
We got to talk about this.
I love Mark. Shout out to Mark.
Mark is like my boy. He's one of my best friends. And he sometimes kind of taunts me with things just because Mark is known for he'll experiment, whatever. Like he's just an OG and he's got he can just do whatever he wants. Like
savage.
Yeah. So he's doing this thing that like Cole Robinson, the old snake diet guy was doing, where it's like the sugar, it's flat out a sugar diet. He's having like Sour Patch Kids for breakfast. I mean, this stuff is wild. Okay. And pure sugar, extremely low protein, like pure sugar, like crazy stuff. And then in the evening time, he'll stack on some protein on there to try to get to close to like 0.8 to 1 gram per pound. The dude is getting diced beyond belief. Granted, his calories are pretty low, so it would be expected. But there's some interesting mechanisms that are going on there. It's this thing called, have you ever heard of fibroblast growth factor 21?
No. What is this?
It sounds like
witchcraft.
Witchcraft or like some like, like something from like a South Park episode, like, here's the fibroblast, So FGF21 is another messenger molecule, kind of like a myokine, that's essentially having these downstream effects on. We've seen FGF21 elevated when people fast, right? That's not uncommon, and it increases uncoupling, so it increases brown fat quite significantly in case basically the dissipation of heat out of the mitochondria, so you're burning calories as heat, but in significant amounts. Like when FGF21 is ramped up, it's pretty significant. We also see it in obese people where FGF21 goes really, really high, but it isn't actually docking at the proper site. Now, what we've kind of learned is, remember when we were all teenagers and when we would consume sugar, and sugar would actually make us bounce off the walls?
Yeah.
It would actually give us energy. And then somewhere along the line, in our 20s and 30s, it's like sugar started doing the opposite. It's like you'd have sugar and you'd crash. You didn't feel the get up and the high from it. How come when you give a 7-year-old sugar, they're uncontrollable? But if you give a 40-year-old sugar, he gets a hit for a fraction of a minute, right? And then it's all just neurochemistry. It's not even getting a physical effect. Why do kids get jittery and want to run around the block? So researchers were looking at this with mice, and they were finding the same kind of thing when they would put mice on these high sucrose diets, not carbohydrate, carbohydrate as sucrose, but not like starch, but pure sucrose. Even in calorie match situations, they would end up losing more fat. And they're like, what's going on? So there's been some human models with this, but then they found that this FGF21 would elevate, which is the same thing that would start elevating like later in a multi-day fast. Long story long, there's this wild fat burning effect that comes from elevating FGF21 in an already healthy, metabolically healthy person. So huge caveat that if someone was insulin resistant or obese, and I'll come back to that and why in a second, it would probably not be the best thing to do. But if you recall, I mentioned that obese people would also have these high levels of FGF21, but they also had FGF21 resistance. So essentially FGF21 would go up, but it would never really dock. We also find that in most people, with the exception of people that are very metabolically healthy and have been active, i.e. Mark Bell, right? Someone like that, that this FGF21 receptivity goes down as we age too. So essentially, that's kind of what happens is like when you're a kid, you're very receptive to this FGF21. It actually does give you energy and it actually does make you sweat and give you this induced thermogenesis and all these other like uncoupling benefits where you're like, yes, sugar, because the body's like, hey, I got energy. It's the way that we all wish it would work, right? Like, wouldn't we all wish that like if we go and sat down and ate, that everything was supply driven, not demand driven? Like we could sit down and we could be like, I'm gonna eat 2,000 calories and it's gonna give me 2,000 calories of energy and I'm gonna go lift rocks. It doesn't quite work like that. But as a kid, it, in a weird way, it kind of does. So anyway, Mark's doing this. He's getting shredded from it. I created some videos. I haven't even released them on it because he's just getting destroyed about it. And like, in a fun way, because Mark's just like, yeah, like race to 0 followers. Let's do it. Have at it. I don't need you guys. But I'm like, I want to do some videos on this because Mark hits me up on these things. And he's like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I'm fascinated by it. I haven't tried it. I haven't tried the sugar fast, but I'm seeing other people talking about it and it's becoming a thing. And mark my words, over the next few months, like there's going to be a lot of people kind of talking about it. And I think it's kind of important that people just understand that this isn't like a fast kind of thing that a metabolically unhealthy person should do. It will still spike your HbA1c like mad. But if you are super fit and you're already like 10% body fat and you're wanting to get crazy shredded, yeah, it does have merit to it. But you're keeping fat super, super low and you're keeping protein actually pretty low, except for like finite periods of time. The other reason it works, I know I'm going off on a lot here, but the other reason that it works is simply by sheer contrast, right? Like when you have a lot of dietary fat coming in, someone like Mark, who has been doing a low carb diet for a really long time, like he really predominantly has low carb, high fat for years. You are upregulating every process. Your body's very much so used to using dietary fat and having that come in. When all of a sudden you rip that away, the body's going to be like, well, wait a minute, I'm still all primed for fats. So it's going to start pulling from your actual stored body fat a little bit easier because you've been conditioning it for years that fat is the primary fuel source. Now, yes, we're all capable of using both fuels, but we are going to tilt the scale towards whatever we eat more of because that's just a simple adaptation. So he's got all these things working for him, which is why he's like dropped like 10 pounds in a week doing it. It's nuts. Like, but anyway, so
it's
you
so
hear
cool.
about that.
Well, I wonder if this is, do you think this might be like a new mechanism to explain the benefits that bodybuilders have always touted when it comes to carb refeeds? I mean, like the carb refeed is like, I mean, some might consider it bro science, but it's like people in the low carb community or dieters in general have been utilizing this like carb rich refeed for a long time, right?
Yeah, they haven't.
But the mechanism, the proposed mechanism, I believe, prior to this new pathway that you've described was like largely thought to be leptin related, right?
Yeah, and leptin is such a wacky one because I don't think that even the best leptin researchers have everything that we need to know about leptin because it's just wild. It's like sometimes you want it low, sometimes you want it high. Like when do you want it low, when do you want it high? And it's really squirrely. Same kind of thing with ghrelin. It's just they're complicated. Hunger hormones are super complicated. I've always attributed most of the success with a cheat meal or a carb refeed more so than just an actual cheat meal. I think there's a major like psychological reward system that comes in that makes it a lot easier to stick to a diet after a carb refeed when you are someone that is fit. When you're not fit, it has an adverse effect a lot of times. But a lot of bodybuilders do that. Like they'll keep carbs relatively low during their cut, and then they'll have pretty massive refeed of like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plus like 100 carbs. And they might be bloated for like a day, but then they feel like they're ready to just go back on their really restrictive diet. It's something psychological, I think, is happening there. But there's also clearly something metabolic. Like I remember when I used to do carb refeeds, I would sweat my ass off that night, right? So I would like be super low carb, and then I would do that. I would go high carb and very low fat for like 2 meals on a Saturday. And just, it wasn't even a cheat meal because it wasn't that pleasurable, because it was like just lots of white rice and things like that just to carb up. And I'd be like drenching the sheets that night. So like something was happening, right?
Wow. So, okay. So Mark, what he's doing, so basically just so that I understand it, he's saving his protein for like the latter half of the day.
Yeah.
And in the mornings and early afternoons, it sounds like he's only eating sugar. Is that what, sounds crazy, but that's what he's doing?
That's what he's doing.
Wow.
And there's evidence on protein restriction elevating this FGF21 as well, but that's not something that I would hang my hat on. Like I wouldn't just say like, oh, we should all restrict protein to elevate this, molecule. We don't want to get lost in mechanistic weeds too much. There's just interesting stuff about it. I've often thought about the whole protein restriction thing though. Like obviously I eat a lot of protein. I probably eat, roughly probably 250 grams a day usually. But I thought about it. I'm like, I wonder if you occasionally restricted protein, if it would actually increase sort of your affinity like for protein, like when you do have protein, like if you occasionally restrict, does it actually trigger some mechanism where your
like
body
sensitize you to leucine?
Exactly. Like, because we talk about insulin sensitivity. What about leucine sensitivity? Is that a thing? It's totally hypothetical, but I'm just like, I've thought about it. Like maybe like occasionally, because like just fasting in general for occasionally doesn't break down muscle unless you're doing it all the time. And like, I wonder if just occasionally like restricting protein would sensitize you. Because like you talk about like some of these people that have 250, 300, 350 grams of protein a day, you think like, are you actually utilizing all of that? Or you developed so much like enzymatic fluidity with this that it's just normal for you?
Wow. So interesting. Yeah. Lots of fodder for further investigation. Super, super interesting stuff. Okay. So we got to number 2. Yeah. So number 2 is that the perpetually lean, they will habitually skip meals. They'll just forget to eat.
Yep.
What's next?
This is an interesting one. I'm skipping a couple because we kind of encompass them a little bit. Like one of them I just will touch on for a second. We've talked about this in another episodes. They don't typically overdo fats a lot. Like, again, me coming as a former like keto guy, like I used to love eating my dietary fat, but like if you're not doing super low carb and carbs are in the equation, like, I mean, again, bodybuilders have been doing this for like ever. Like if you want to shred up, you reduce the dietary fat. It may not be the best thing for your health, but it's definitely going to lean you out real quick.
Well, people think that there's like a get out of jail free card for fats. And it's like added fats, the calories add up. We talked about this on your show the last time I was on your show. And then I recently discussed this with Kelly Levesque, who's a nutritionist who I love. But it's true. It's just like, added fats add up really quickly. And it's like when I'm at if I go to Sweetgreen or whatever and they're putting olive oil on my salad, which is olive oil is very healthy, but it's like you don't know whether or not they're pouring 100 calories or 1,000 calories
it's hard
of pure fat. And so these days I prefer to get most of my fats from Whole Foods. Like I'm not adding, I don't go hard on the beef tallow or anything like that, but that people are obsessed with these days, or even extra virgin olive oil, which I love. I've written about. I've promoted. Like, I'm very deliberate about my exposure to added fats.
It's the best word for it. Is just be deliberate about your fats.
But,
But the one that I wanted to mention is skinny people tend to starve their feelings rather than eat their feelings. And when you start talking to a lot of them, you realize that. Like people that, again, I'm talking about just innately skinny people, not necessarily people that are like walking around yoked out. We're talking about just like a lot of times like just women and men that just like if they were to take their shirt off, be like, yeah, he's fit, like not like he's shredded. But a lot of times you talk to those people and when they get stressed out, they don't have an appetite. And then you talk to a lot of overweight and obese people and it's no knock on them whatsoever. It's like they get stressed out, they tend to eat, right? So what caused this? Who knows? But it's just an observation. Where is that a switch that you can flip in your own mind? Possibly, but it sounds like it's something that's going to happen pretty subconscious. Still wild. I mean, I think about myself. Yeah, when I'm stressed out, I tend to not eat. But when I was overweight before, that was something that I would do to solve my problems in a lot of ways. So it's kind of funny. That is a way that I was able to change. And it's like you get in these moments of stress and it's so easy to just boom, overdo it and not even realize it because you're almost in a time warp of stress.
And also the foods that you tend to reach for when stressed are not always, they're typically not supportive of a healthy body composition.
For sure. And you know, come to think of it at this moment, it's like cortisol is such an interesting hormone because it can work for you or against you depending on the climate of your body. Right? So it's like cortisol is also a very important catalyst for hormone-sensitive lipase and for fat loss. It's tremendous for that, obviously. Like when you're not eating and you're starving, cortisol can actually work in your favor. Yes, it can be catabolic, but hopefully you're not pushing it that far, right? So it's helping you burn fat. But cortisol and carbohydrates or cortisol and insulin or cortisol and high calorie at any point in time are not the best combination. It's like cortisol has the abilities like this villain that can go either way, right? So he's in your body, he's doing something to you, whether it's good or bad. But it's like all of a sudden, if you're stressed and you're spiking your insulin, because insulin is supposed to blunt cortisol, but you can kind of override it if you're really overdoing it, right? So if you're going for the Doritos when you're stressed, you're almost putting yourself in a strange way in this like super physiological state that really shouldn't exist. Like I think the fundamental nature of our body is when you're stressed, you probably don't eat as much. But we override it because we have hyperpalatable things that will override lots of things in our body.
Here's a hypothesis. I'm curious to know your thoughts. So if you've got cortisol, say you're stressed out. We all encounter stress, right? It's part of the human experience. You've got cortisol doing its thing, which is indiscriminately tearing down tissue. You know, it's the body's primary catabolic hormone. Would you say that rather than reaching for carb and fat laden foods, if you are in fact hungry during that period in which you're stressed out, reaching for protein instead might in fact preserve your muscle and allow that cortisol to do its job, but primarily on fat tissue?
Yeah,
do you think there could be a benefit of eating, but rather than eating what you might typically eat when stressed, reaching for protein instead?
Yeah, this is the time when, so a lot of our hunger signals will tell us to either go for, sugar or salt a lot of times, right? So this is where I think like beef jerky or meat sticks really come in handy because they satisfy that savory thing with a byproduct of protein. Because unfortunately, when you're stressed, protein shakes don't usually sound all that good. Like chicken breast doesn't sound all that good. You kind of want something that is snack food oriented. So that's why I do keep like chomp sticks and I keep like those Paleo Valley sticks. I keep all kinds of just like, I keep them in my pantry because I'm invariably going to get stressed. And if I do want to stress eat, I'm going to go for something like that. You're still having an insulin spike with protein. So you could argue that the insulin spike from protein is actually going to curb the cortisol a little bit too. It's a different insulin spike than what you get from sugar, of course, because you have glucagon kind of coexisting with it. And that's something I don't know for sure. If insulin spikes and glucagon is with it, is insulin still going to act on cortisol the same way that carbohydrates would? I would think so, because insulin is still present. So it's probably going to blunt cortisol a little bit too.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good to know. Okay, so try not to eat your feelings. And if you do want to cave, as we all do on occasion, try to reach for higher protein foods as opposed to the confectionery foods, the junk foods. Yep. Yeah.
Here's a wild one. And this is one that's, again, full disclosure. Like this stuff is just anecdotal. Like there's things that like I've just talked to people. A lot of times skinny people, you'll see them add lemon to their water at restaurants. Like and maybe is it a health conscious thing because they know that like there's some benefits with lemon. I don't know, but it's like almost every skinny person that I've ever like gone to lunch with, they're the ones that get the lemon in their water. And does the lemon magically do something, or is this like the fact that these are more maybe possibly innately health conscious people? They're like, no, I know there's some benefit. There are benefits to lemon water. I mean, yes, we could get down that rabbit hole. It's kind of it's a little cringy sometimes because there's a lot of things like the magical cure of lemon water. But I mean, lemon water, yeah, it does have some amylase inhibitors. It does actually potentially slow down carb digestion. There are some benefits there. The acidic component itself can actually activate AMPK and tilt you in a little bit more of a deficit scale, but it's negligible. But there is something there. But when you're stacking all these little things together, who knows? Like maybe there is something to like people that put lemon in their water before they eat. Maybe there's an appetite suppressant effect, which I think there is. I think there is a little bit of an appetite suppressant effect, if I'm not mistaken. But maybe that's making them eat a little less at lunch. Who knows?
Also, just drinking water, right?
True.
Can drinking water aren't there studies that show that you drink a glass of water before a meal and it like significantly cuts down on the calories that you
Oh yeah, for sure.
then consume?
That was like one of my first hacks that I put out there, like on YouTube, like 10 years ago. It was like just drink a dang glass of water before you go grocery shopping too. Like just do that. So call me crazy, but like you're satiated, you make a little bit better decisions. So like before you go grocery shopping or if you go to a restaurant, like just pound some water for a little bit. It's and again, like I'm so full of useless garbage in my brain from 10 years of this stuff. But so I never remember the actual studies themselves. But there was one study in particular that was super wild. That was like a half a liter of water consumption. It led to like, I want to say it was like close to 100 additional calories burned over the course of like the hour, right? Like just by drinking a half a liter of water. So it used to be, oh, well, it's just the thermic effect and how much energy it costs to raise the temperature of this water. Remember when people used to say like drink cold water because it takes energy to heat it? That's highly, debatable, but it's also negligible. There's an osmotic effect where when it's actually being absorbed, to actually change sort of the gradient and make it so the water could be absorbed, it causes more of the potassium pumps to actually kick into overdrive and kind of help in that respect. So there's a metabolic effect of just the digestion of water if you drink like a decent volume, again, not a crazy amount, but like a half a liter. So again, very widely like variable depending on like the situation, how much food is in your stomach, how dehydrated someone is. But at the end of the day, it does cost calories to consume and ultimately absorb water. So if you're just constantly drinking water and you're constantly hydrated and making sure at least your minerals are also in check, yeah, there's probably a fat loss effect to that.
That makes sense. Yeah, minerals are satiating. I mean, we always talk about protein, and from the macro standpoint, I mean, protein as a macronutrient, it's the most satiating of the three. But there is this whole body of literature that I'm not super fluent in, but looking at various micronutrients and their impact on satiety. And if I recall correctly, I had a bit of a back and forth with somebody on X. God, I'm forgetting who it was. It was either Brad Homer or I'm forgetting exactly who it was. But somebody pointed out to me that calcium is actually a very satiating micronutrient. Like foods that are rich in calcium are particularly satiating. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look more into that because I don't remember exactly. But yeah, there are micronutrients do have an impact on satiety.
Yeah, they do for sure. And
which is interesting because like I mean, well, it makes perfect sense because hunger. What is the purpose of hunger?
Yeah, to get adequate nutrition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I've wondered that about like multivitamins. I'm like, Sarah, has anyone ever done a study like looking at like, people going long periods of time without food or very, very low calorie and just their subjective hunger scores if they have like a multivitamin or not?
Yeah.
Like that would be really interesting because ultimately you gotta know that there's more than just like a demand for basic energy and calories coming in. Like we are a very finely tuned mechanism that really has sort of machine that's looking for all kinds of things to run seamlessly. And it's like, okay, if you're deficient in a given nutrient, like you're probably craving something, but we're so distorted with all our different hunger cues. Like how could you possibly know what you're actually craving these days?
Yeah. Okay. So I looked it up. Marty Kendall has a website that I've known about for a long time, optimizingnutrition.com. And he tweeted at me that after protein, calcium is next in line as a key factor in the satiety equation. Our modern food system contains a lot less of it, so we crave calcium and we keep eating until we get enough. Without dairy, adequate bioavailable calcium is a major challenge. I mean, you get calcium in spinach, but it's like the bioavailability is a fraction of what it is in dairy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But that's fascinating.
That makes sense. It's kind of wild. It's so funny how kids naturally crave milk too. Like it's just wild. Like they crave dairy more. It's so wild. Like, I mean, I observe my own kids. I observe the friends of my kids. It's like they always really like they want like a yogurt or they want like a cottage cheese or they want like a milk. I mean, yeah, if you give them the options to have junk, but if you're like really looking at like, hey, what's in the fridge? Like I can make you, a turkey sandwich, or I could have you make you a turkey cheese roll up or whatever. They're like, no, I want a yogurt. And like it kind of like slowly goes away as they get older. But I'm like 7 and under, it's weird. They always want like a glass of milk. It's kind of wild.
It is weird, yeah. And I actually like when thinking about it, there are a few things to me that are as satiating as Greek yogurt. Like Greek yogurt is loaded with protein. Yeah. It's also loaded with calcium. So I wonder if the calcium is actually like having that market an impact. But
yeah, no, I think he's onto something with that. That's really interesting because there's the whole thing with sodium and the NST neurons. I think we may have talked about maybe even offline with that before. It's only in rodent model. But I don't always I don't poo-poo something just because it's in rodent model. Like a lot of times things when people understand like how grants work and how funding works and things like that, it's like really hard to get a study done. So sometimes like if you look at something that's in a rodent model phase and it's safe, it's not like this fringe crazy thing. Like, okay, you're going to do something wild and then it worked for rodents. But like if they're testing something like what I'm about to share on rodents and it has a profound effect and like, why wouldn't you just try it and see if it works? So the NST neuron thing, they have NST neurons in the hindbrain. So essentially when we are hardwired to get our salt intake in however we need it. And we're looking at this because livestock will like find a salt lick no matter where it is, right? Mm-hmm. They will find that salt lick because it's so critical for them. And humans are really no different. Like we need salt. Like salt's super important for all kinds of different function. But we have these NST neurons and they're also gustatory signaled. So meaning like when something comes in our gut, it can signal to these NST neurons in our brain. And the premise of this study was that they found that essentially the wires kind of get crossed in mice when mice were actually craving sugar, but they actually needed salt. So it was like if they had salt, it curbed their sugar cravings. If they had sugar, they still had a sugar craving and then they wanted more because they weren't actually getting their salt craving fixed.
Wow.
But it was really salt that they were after. But because the NST neurons in the hindbrain respond similarly to sugar and salt, they were craving salt, but if sugar was available, they would want sugar because it would taste better. So they'd go for the sugar. It's so wild. So it's like, in some ways, I have sort of advised in a fun way for ways that work for people. I'm like, hey, like if you're craving sugar, try having something salty. Try having a little bit of salt in your water and see what happens. And all I have is the opinions of probably at this point, at least hundreds of people that have commented in response to that. And they're like, it works. It works. Like if I have salt in my water when I'm craving something sweet, my sugar craving is gone. Could they psychosomatically be doing it? Absolutely. But it's still wild.
Yeah, well, I'm drinking my Element right now, which, did you see there was like a big controversy about Element a couple months ago on social media. People like were freaking out because of the allegation that there's maltodextrin in Element. Did you look into that at all?
Yeah, for sure. That was it felt like a smear piece for sure. It felt, and I think the frustrating thing about it is like anyone that's I brought a number of experts in to actually talk about it. Like we just handled it head on. Like I've known the guys at Element for a really long time, and they are one of the most powerful players in terms of like getting people off of garbage products, right? Yeah. So for them to take a hit because there's natural flavors that have maltodextrin seemed like really missing the forest for the trees. And it really frustrated me because maltodextrin is just basically like a flavoring, no matter what kind of flavoring, whether it's natural, artificial, whether it's organic, whatever. It's so small, you can't mix it into something. So you have to give it a carrier. That's how this all comes to be. So like maltodextrin, you can have maltodextrin and have a very small amount of maltodextrin, and it will give it just enough volume that they can actually equally disperse the flavor. That's all there is to it. Now, natural flavors can have nefarious things in them. But again, we miss the forest for the trees. We're talking about where things get confusing is, you're talking 200 to 400 milligrams of maltodextrin. For people that are not familiar with nutrition science, that sounds like a lot. It's not. We're talking a fraction of a gram of a carbohydrate. There's more carbohydrates in an egg. And it's not. So the part that was the most frustrating wasn't that people were sort of insinuating that this was like totally nefarious and this evil thing. The part that frustrated me was like, okay, we've got a lot of work to do in terms of educating the public, like, because these people were genuinely scared. Like there were mean people. There were people that look for any opportunity to bash you and I because we promote a product. How dare we make a living, right? But there's also people that were like, because people were making videos being like, this is one lady in particular, I don't call people out, but she knows who she is, and this was dirty, telling people they're going to end up in the emergency room if they're insulin resistant and drink Element. Meanwhile, she had products on her own page, on her own shop, that had natural flavors in them. Messed up, right? But you can't tell people, with a medical license, by the way. So it's like, you can't lie like that. You can't, like, that's not going to put someone in the emergency room, or that's not going to land someone in the hospital that is insulin resistant. Like maltodextrin, I'm not going to go willingly like chug a bottle of it, but if it gives me a quarter of a gram of carbohydrate and I can consume something that actually gives me the minerals that I need, that's helping me, but also something that I could be drinking in lieu of a diet soda or in lieu of an actual soda, but like, I know what I'm going to choose. So I brought Dr. Andrew Kutnick in. He's like the leading insulin researcher probably right now. You got Dr. Ben Bickman, who's definitely like top tier. And then you've got Andrew Kutnick, who does a little bit more on the exercise side. He has zero vested interest at all with Element, like no affiliation. And he's also a type 1 diabetic and a lifelong type 1 diabetic. So everything also, given how like data oriented he is and like such a scientist in every way that he operates his life. I mean, he looks at every single blip on the radar of his CGM constantly and cross-references it with everything. He's obsessed. And he's like, dude, I, first of all, notice zero things on my CGM whatsoever. He's like, as a type 1 diabetic and a leading insulin researcher in this field with a grant in hand, it's like, I can tell you that this stuff is absorbed and gone before it ever even reaches your gut. Like, this is such a minuscule, ridiculous amount of maltodextrin that is getting blown so far out of proportion. He's like, this is not affecting anybody, especially like people that are concerned if they're insulin resistant. So again, it went from me getting angry to me being more like, well, no, people are genuinely concerned. And like, there's too much like demonization over carbohydrates, and understanding that like sometimes something like maltodextrin can be helpful because the alternatives are sometimes not very good. There's other carriers that aren't good either. And like, you can use things like tapioca as a carrier, but tapioca also has a fair deal of like digestive issues for people, or digestive upset. And the other thing is that maltodextrin is derived from corn, and some people get concerned about the corn allergy situation. Like, corn as an allergen, it doesn't even make the top allergen list. Like, it's very few people have an allergy to corn. But this is one time where hyper processing of something actually works in our favor, because it is so hyper processed to actually extract and ultimately leave you with just a pure maltodextrin that it would not have any effect as an allergen. So all like the claims against Element are pretty much like just void. Like, it's just, it came down to a thing of, okay, well, are they doing this to be misleading? And it's very clear they weren't trying to be misleading.
Right.
They're using a natural flavor, just like every other brand that's out there. If you want to avoid natural flavors, you would have avoided Element in the first place, because it clearly states that there's natural flavors. So it's like, if you don't like natural flavors, totally cool. You weren't drinking Element to begin with. So what's the deal here?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about milligrams of maltodextrin. And I remember, this was like more than a decade ago, but I used to buy maltodextrin as a supplement because it's a correct me if I'm wrong, it's like a glucose polymer essentially.
Yeah,
it's just like long chains of glucose. So it's like great in terms of like if you're actually seeking to rapidly re-glycogenate your muscles, like after a hard workout. But I was like consuming 75 to 100 grams of maltodextrin.
I visited you in the hospital after that.
yeah. But it's so funny that the keto community, the dogma, right? Yeah. Like from these diet tribes, it's gotten to the point where, we're talking about, again, milligrams of glucose. Your body knows how to handle glucose. And even if it isn't it isn't effectively handling glucose. Like if you've got glucose intolerance or you're, insulin resistant, like we're still only talking about milligrams of this polymer.
Yeah. Again, it's wild on one hand, but then it's like you think about like the echo chamber that so many of these people that watch certain silos of content live in. Like they don't know the opposite. They don't know the other side. Yeah. And I think when I put the video out there that kind of helped people understand what maltodextrin is doing, and this wasn't a piece again that was like designed even about Element. It was about maltodextrin in the first place. The comments made it very clear that people were like, well, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's like rage bait today. Like rage bait is used to siphon clout. And one of the things that I love about your content is that you don't play into that. Yeah. Like you never play into that, which is I think so admirable today.
So keep going on this list a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay. They're chocolate eaters.
They're chocolate eaters?
Not like, that's the other wild one, right? Like, so you talk to these people that are skinny. I'm not saying that magically there's plenty of chocolate eaters that aren't
chocolate
skinny.
Can make you lean?
Yeah. Well, actually, yes. There are some cool stuff there. I mean, the flavonoids, the theobromine, like they are very fat burning or, promoting compounds, independent of the calories, right? So we don't need to explain to anyone. Most people that watch and listen to your stuff, they're educated in this world enough to know that like dark chocolate is different. And obviously you want to screen for heavy metals and all the kind of chocolate prerequisites. But it's kind of funny because, you've got a lot of people that are unhealthy that eat chocolate. But it's kind of funny that the kind of chocolate they eat, you typically know. They're not usually going for dark chocolate. But there are so many people out there. It's so crazy. Like, especially again, like you talk to like women that love chocolate, like when there are ones that are like electing for dark chocolate, they're like, I feel like I really enjoy chocolate and I have like myself a couple ounces a day. They like responsibly eat chocolate, but chocolate is like a staple for them. It is crazy. It's like when I talk to people, it's like 7 out of 10 skinny people. They're just like, I have a little bit of dark chocolate.
Interesting.
That number changed a little bit when the whole heavy metal thing came out because, and I'm getting somewhere with this. So when that happened, like that probably dropped. I couldn't tell you exactly how much, but there was a lot of chocolate lovers that I knew that kind of ditched the chocolate, which leads me to believe that, again, it's not just that they're skinny, it's that they're innately health conscious. So they know they're like, okay, antioxidants, polyphenols, flavonoids, I'm going to elect for chocolate because it also tastes good and I'm getting these benefits. So the moment that there wasn't a health benefit anymore, they did actually scrap it, right? So it wasn't maybe this subconscious desire for chocolate, but I know I'm that way. Like chocolate is a vice for me. But I notice a big difference in my body composition when I switch from like an 85 and I'm like, let myself start slipping down to like a 72 and then a 65. And I'm like, wait a minute. No. I'm missing the point here. Now I just want chocolate. Go back to, So it's a very big difference, like the dark chocolate versus the, the lighter dark or the milk chocolate.
Very well. Okay. So let's unpack this. Like chocolate has, what is the predominant saturated fatty acid that comprises cacao butter? Is it stearic acid?
I think it's stearic acid. It's not myristic. I think myristic is
no, I think it's stearic acid. Yeah, which has been, I believe, in some studies shown to support mitochondrial health, which is important. It's it's got this sort of stimulant effect, right? Like it's got theobromine, it's got caffeine, but then also cocoa flavonols are great. I mean, I now work with a company called Cocovia, but I was a fan of theirs for a really long time prior to having a relationship with them, and cocoa flavonols support blood flow. They support nitric oxide production in the body, might boost VO2 max.
Yep. Epicatechin, all this stuff.
All that stuff, So I love that.
Yeah, and it's like, they're not eating bars of it a day, but I mean, it's like, hey, you have a couple ounces a day. Think about how that adds up. I remember seeing this thing a while back. There's more polyphenols and stuff in chocolate than there is in coffee. Coffee has a lot, but there is more in dark chocolate. And I can't remember the study. That's always how it goes for me. But most people in the United States get most of their antioxidants in a given day from their coffee, from their morning coffee, right? So the largest bolus of antioxidants and polyphenols that most Americans get is just coming from their simple cup of coffee, which is cool in 2 ways, or cool in one way, bad in the other, right? It tells us like awesome about coffee, but like shows you how just devoid of nutrition most people's diet is. Right. So when you think about the fact that chocolate has quite a bit more than coffee in terms of antioxidants and polyphenols, it actually makes sense. I'm like, okay, you're someone that is probably just getting more antioxidants. And polyphenols, obviously tremendous for the microbiome. So there's all these different downstream effects that you could unpack and be like, yeah, you're probably just functioning and fluxing at a higher capacity because you have less reactive oxygen species.
Wow. Good to know. craving chocolate now. I've got a habit that I want to throw into the hat here and see and get your thoughts on it. I don't even know if it's on your list, but something that I've perceived to be true about people who seem to always be lean is that they tend to be mindful about their meals, about mealtime. They tend to tune out distractions. Yeah. So they're not eating, they tend not to eat mindlessly while watching TV or scrolling on their phones. They tend to be very present with their food. And I recall reading research a couple years back that found that it is actually, in fact, the case that when we are distracted while eating, we tend to consume about 15% more calories. Yep. Is that something that you found in your own surveys?
Yeah, for sure. It's I didn't even phrase it quite like that, but it was almost like they would take dedicated time for their meals, right? So it's like they would, or when they would have their meals, like it would be prioritized with family and friends, right? And it's again, it's something that, and a lot of times like these people are people that would have like decent social lives, or they'd have people that come over, or big families, right? So it's like you could go either way. Like you can, if you overdo that, but also if you're prioritizing the time in which you eat and you're actually savoring each bite. It's kind of funny because it's like the term foodie, it's like I consider myself a foodie, but like we think of the word foodie, you think of someone that's almost a glutton, like this person loves food. No, I appreciate my food, and I do love a really good meal, and I love fine cuisine, and I love these things. I appreciate it, but I want to sit down and I want to enjoy it. I do have a bad habit of eating my food too fast no matter what.
Me too.
But that's usually just more time crunch, but I'm not distracted and like watching TV or scrolling Instagram while I'm eating.
Makes perfect sense. All right, what else we got?
We got some more. Let's see. This is an interesting one because I wrote down that they have an input-output relationship with food. And this is sketchy territory because it can get you in trouble when you talk about it. But one of the things that I have found is that people that are thin or people that are naturally fit, they have a natural understanding of the input and then what output they need to do to match that, and vice versa. So for example, my mom taught me from a very young age, and I now teach my kids that like food is fuel. And when you eat fuel, like you want to move in an appropriate manner with that fuel, right? You want to, so like if you overeat, it's not like you obsess about it and you go hit the stair climber for X amount of time to erase that meal from your life. We're not talking bulimia or any kind of tendencies like that. We're talking having a healthy relationship with it. And I think this is where it can get kind of, confusing. As someone that like I had an eating disorder when I was a teenager, and I understood that, right? But one of the ways that my mom helped me through that was by teaching me a healthy way to understand that like food is fuel, rather than thinking, hey, like I ate something, it's bad, I need to punish myself. Like, okay, I ate a large meal. That's acceptable. That happens, but I do need to move some more. I do need to understand the input, output, calories in, calories out. And for some reason, somewhere along the lines, it became like a little bit taboo to like talk about it like that, because it comes across as you're like, that's disordered eating. Just eat your meal and get on with your day. Yes, if that happens now and then, sure, like don't obsess over it. But most people that they do have that input output, but it happens naturally. Where like they ate more. It's almost like the FGF21 thing we were talking about. They ate more and they're like, I probably should move. I'm gonna go for a walk around the block, or I might exercise a little bit more tomorrow. Yeah, I feel like I overate by like 1,000 calories yesterday. I can just feel it. So it makes sense that I'm just gonna move a little bit more today. And it's not an unhealthy, weird relationship. They just do it. They have that input, output, and that's fine.
Wow. So they're not obsessed, but they do tend to keep a running tab of like the amount of food that they've consumed. Somehow, I guess the caloric density, like they're cognizant of whether or not they've had like maybe an excessively fatty meal the night prior. Yep. And they cater their activity accordingly.
Totally. And it's our, Bill Maeda, that the ripped dude on Instagram, he's like in his 60s or he's like late 50s, and he's Japanese. He lives in Hawaii. He's like sometimes lifts stuff with his mouth. You ever see that guy?
Maybe.
He's like a phenom, but he's and I interviewed him just because I found him fascinating, because like anyone that's like pushing 60 and is shredded like that, but also just very mindful and very like, I love what he has to say. He's such a kind gentleman, like so nice. Like you should totally interview him. Like he's great. Cool. He'll come out. When I asked him like what he eats, like his diet is wholesome, but he doesn't like pay super close attention to it. And he's a very spiritual guy. And he's like when I eat, he's like, I eat until I am like feeling a fire in my belly. He's like, and I feel this fire in my belly. He's like, and if I start to eat so much that the fire gets stifled, he's like, I stop eating. He's like, I listen to like pretty much the energetic value of his food. He's like on another level, man. Like, and I believe that this stuff exists. Like as a pretty spiritual person myself, like I believe that there's other things that come into play, like that maybe we haven't identified with science, like with how certain foods might affect us. So he's just kind of like, yeah, I've kind of identified the foods that make me feel that fire, that make me want to move. He's like, sometimes it's actually like, it's a good croissant. He's like, but a lot of times it's like rice and something that just gets me this fire in my belly and makes me want to move. And like, you can't do that unless you really know your body, right? You can't, like, if you tried doing that with Doritos, like you would have fireworks going off in your brain from all the neurochemicals and all the things that are happening that you would never actually even get to feel what's happening here. So again, this like very spiritual look at it. But what I'm saying with what he's getting at there is that he understands that natural input output, right? He just at such a deeper level than we could even really describe.
I wonder if that's you said he's Japanese.
Yep.
I wonder if that's like a cultural thing, because they say in Okinawa, they eat until they're like 80% full.
Exactly. And he's like, I don't want to butcher it because I respect him so much, but he's like, his dad or something was like 5th or 6th generation samurai. So he's like, comes from this samurai lineage where like everything obviously very spiritual, very like warrior focused. And so everything he does, like how he trains, it was so inspiring. It changed my life hanging out with him for a couple of days in Honolulu, because he's just like, even his training, and this is actually on my list too, is so we can just dovetail right into it. I was talking about like a lot of times these people are that are skinny are like, they're busy people, so their workouts are a lot of times short. A lot of times they do these short workouts, and his workouts were crazy short. When I worked out with him, it was intense and it was short, and I was actually surprised it was done already. He's like, no, this is how I train. He's like, dude, I'm almost 60. He's like, how I look like this and how I function like this is like by knowing exactly when I get to 80, 90%, exactly how I get to where I need to be. He's like, and then I'm done.
Wow.
And he's like, that's how I don't get injured too. And it's just like, it sounds so simple, like people listening and just like, okay, like that's not amazing. But when you're in the presence of this guy and you see just how amazing he is at what he does, you're like, dude, there's something there. He eats until his body tells him not to, and he feels a fire. And then he goes and he uses that fire until the fire is gone. And then it's done. And then he repeats. It's crazy.
So cool. And he also lives in sun-drenched Hawaii.
Dude, right?
Have you seen that?
That's another one on the list, by the way. But
really?
Yeah.
Did you see that study a couple months ago? It found that high-dose vitamin D, it was a mouse study, but it found that vitamin D seems to divert energy excess to building muscle as opposed to the storage of fat.
No shit. I did not see that.
Yeah. So I've given you two things for future Thomas DeLauer YouTube videos. You've got the calcium, and then, so this was a mouse study. It found that high-dose vitamin D boosted...
I'm literally writing this down.
Yeah, boosted leptin sensitivity, suppressed myostatin, which you've talked about myostatin. Myostatin is like this like limiting... It limits how much you can accrue muscle, and it increased resting energy expenditure. And for people that want to look it up, the PMID nerds in the audience... I guess it's also worth noting that, well, according to the PubMed link, it has not yet been peer-reviewed by a journal, but it is set for publication in, what is this freaking title? Sometimes it's so hard, or the journal. It's I don't know the abbreviation, but it's the first author is Jeffrey Roizen, and the study is high-dose dietary vitamin D allocates surplus calories to muscle growth instead of fat via modulation of myostatin and leptin signaling. So it's pretty dope. So maybe that's a mechanism by which, like, everybody's had that experience of going on vacation and just like eating, like they're going to the grave. But then surprisingly they end up, they go back home and they find that the scale hasn't actually gone up.
Man, that is badass. Yeah, no, I have been recently I've always loved the sun, but I have just, over the last like 6 months, I don't want to say unhealthily obsessed, but I'm like obsessed with the sun. Like I'm just like going down like that rabbit hole so much, where it's just like so much of it is inexplainable too. And some of which it is explainable. Like some of which is just like, it is such an energy currency for our body. Like and it makes so much sense. And obviously it's just come as something that's so obvious because it's the sun that maybe we haven't like reverse engineered why it's so crazy. But you've got guys like Jack Cruz that, he's got a little bit of an attitude sometimes, but he's like
Definitely a dick.
but,
Smart.
But the stuff is like, okay, well, maybe some other people need to like start looking at what he's doing and kind of going their own directions with it, which I think we're starting to see. But anyway, the sun, also just vasodilation, also all these just things that happen with it would make sense for nutrient partitioning and proper utilization.
Yeah. So cool. So maybe that's another mechanism by which Medea seems to be thriving. And like 3/4 of the U.S. population or global population is low in vitamin D, which might play a role in the the skyrocketing rates of obesity that we're seeing now in adults and children. Let's do one more. You got one more for us?
Dude, I have
and I just texted you the study.
Oh, sweet. I saw it. Okay. It was, where'd it go here? There we go. Yeah, so it was time outside was the other one. Okay, so the other one was, there's two that I kind of want to rope together because I want to end on these two. So it was it's going to sound crazy, okay, but they tend to be people that have like shakes and smoothies. And when I don't mean like necessarily like I'm going to go like make a protein shake because I need to hit my protein goals. A lot of times they are the people that just go out and, crazy enough, I don't want to even like, they might, where we live, it'd be Erewhon, right? So a $30 smoothie or something. But like, I'm going to go to Erewhon and get a smoothie, or dare I say, maybe not Jamba Juice, but like something that's like, they're going to get a whole food smoothie or something. And I'm not saying that like everyone needs to do that, because you are kind of bypassing the GLP-1 effect. Like your liquid calories are almost certain surefire way to like pack on calories and pack on weight if you're not careful. But I've noticed that like people that are inherently skinny, they do that a lot. Like they just kind of skip lunch and be like, I'm just going to get a smoothie. And again, these are people that maybe aren't watching our content. They're not flooding their mind with all kinds of different information. This is just how they roll through life. And I think about how my mom used to do it too. My mom was just always skinny. She wasn't like making super health conscious decisions all the time, but she was just naturally kind of thin. And her genetics really weren't even to be super thin. Like her parents weren't super thin. Her grandparents weren't super thin. But it's just like she developed these like things, and she would just be busy all the time. And she would actually just get a smoothie for lunch. And maybe it's just because there was only probably 300 or 400 calories in the smoothie versus going and getting a burger that was 1,000. It could be that. Or there could also be all the benefits that come just from fruit. Maybe she was just getting her fruit in that way. But my mom's not the only one. Like I'm sure you know people too. It's just like they prefer to just have like this light lunch. And it kind of bridges into the other side of the thing being like, a lot of times they kind of have these like random calorie dips throughout the day. So they'll do like one larger meal and then like two really small meals. So sometimes it is a large lunch. Like they'll skip breakfast, have a large lunch, and then eat like a bird for dinner. My wife is that way too. My wife's not crazy fit. She's in incredible shape and looks good, but she's not like a fitness type person. But she looks great, and that's kind of her style. Like she barely eats breakfast. She prefers lunch to be her primary meal, and then she would rather just have like a smoothie or something for dinner. So it's like this, like whoop, and rather than boom, 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 it's like this, boop, boom. It's like one main meal, and the rest just kind of these auxiliary sort of ancillary meals.
Interesting. Yeah, we love to talk shit about smoothies because, I think we love to, in the wellness world, let perfect be the enemy of the good. But there's no doubt that you can construct a really healthful smoothie. I mean, my friend Kelly Levesque, who I mentioned earlier, she's famous for her Fab 4 smoothie. It's like protein, a healthy fat source, fiber, and if you lead with protein and you fill it with a bunch of whole fruit, which has fiber, different types of fibers, like there's no doubt that that's going to be a better option generally than like a fast food meal.
For sure,
right,
dude. Well, it comes back to just like, fruit being demonized wrongly. And it's like, you can, yes, if you go to someplace like Jamba Juice, like, yeah, they're going to make it with predominantly like orange sherbet, and then they're going to put like some fruit in there. But you could go and get a fruit smoothie that's really not that bad, right?
Yeah.
Like strawberry puree that's been frozen, that's really probably just strawberry. Just do your due diligence on like what it is, right?
Yeah.
And kind of the rule is like always, like if you're, let's say like, I guess maybe this could help. If you had to go to Jamba Juice, right? If you had to go to Jamba Juice and you're like, this is the only thing, I'm starving, I have to go to Jamba Juice. I don't know when that would ever happen, but let's pretend it, right? What would you do? Like I couldn't tell you exactly what smoothie to get, but I'm sure there is something that you could get. You could be like, hey, could you take a bunch of frozen peaches, a bunch of frozen strawberries, and like 2 scoops of whey protein, and like put it, I mean, they would probably do it and just have them make it with water or milk or almond milk if you had to, and not orange juice like they normally do. I mean, not that bad of a meal, right? So the rule is kind of like always take the protein add-ons that they do and have them do 2 of it.
Yeah.
Because the little scoops, if you ever look at a smoothie bar, when they say add a scoop of protein, it's like this pathetic little small scoop that's probably like 8 grams of protein.
Yeah.
So have them pay the $2 or the $3 and have them do like 2 or 3 scoops of it.
By the way, sorry guys, I don't know, the printer in my studio just started going off. It's like a ghost print.
It's Bill Maeda. It's
Yeah, it must be. Yeah, from afar. That is, very, very useful information. Yeah, I did a smoothie with Earth Bar maybe like 2 years ago now, and I filled it with really satiating, like, low sugar fruits. There was maybe some avocado in there, an extra dollop of protein. So yeah, there are definitely ways to make healthy smoothies. So I love this advice. What is being printed by my printer right now? That is so odd. Anyway, Thomas DeLauer, you are always a beam of insight, and I love that you bring the receipts and
That's
also,
what I was just printing there.
That's what you're just printing, the receipts. Yeah, man, but always with the references and the real world, the real world knowledge of being a fitness professional for, however many years you've been one. I love the perspective. So thanks for coming in.
Right on, man. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, you're the man. And just remind my listeners where they can find you, connect with you, consume your work.
Yeah. Thomas DeLauer on Instagram is easy. ThomasDeLauer.com, and YouTube, just search for my name.
You're the man.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you guys for listening. Love you all, and I will catch you on the next episode. Peace. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.